Hi everyone. Today I'm going to make a little introductory tutorial on how to set up a Java Swing application in Netbeans. Of course, there's lots of ways to set up a Java Swing application, but within Netbeans there's a whole GUI builder tailored specifically for Java Swing. And this GUI builder allows you to drag and drop components, and the Netbeans will initialize the Java Swing application itself instead of having to hard code the whole hierarchy of all the JFrames and JPanels and all those attributes. So, just to get started here, just like any other Java project, we're going to go create file, new project, and just to have a sense of simplicity, kind of like we're doing with our main application here for class, I'm going to just set up a Java Maven project. So I'll go here, I'll go next, I'll just name it GUI demonstration, and here we go. So here we are. This is just your default source package. It's com.cs 2212 just because of how I have my Netbeans set up so that my main class project here works properly. So here's going to be the default kind of class that gets initialized here. This is your main class for this project. It's just a standard Java class. And you can see up at the top you only have the source and the history options here. Source, of course, is just the source code for the class. And then history, every time you save, there will be a basic version of your save here. So that kind of like the way that Git works. If you mess up your whole file, you can go back and find an older version of it. But what we're interested in is actually a different kind of file. So if you go here, and we're just going to do our normal create a new file, what we would usually create would be this Java class, but we're actually going to want to work within this JFrame form class. So when we create this, GUI or JFrame demo, there we go. So you can see this is still just a standard Java file. The source code's not really going to look any different than that of a regular Java class, one that's not tailored to be a Swing application. But in Netbeans, we get this third tab here called Design. So if we click on this, we can see this is our JFrame, which is kind of the backdrop that all of the Java Swing components will be put on. And then from here, I'll show you guys kind of how to navigate around this area a little bit more. So first, let me get rid of these. These tabs I just closed don't typically open when you first start working in Netbeans, and kind of through experimentation I found that they help me work a lot more efficiently with Java Swing. So I'm just going to show you guys kind of what they all do. So this search bar up here, this is where you're going to look for all these tabs you want to have opened in Netbeans. I'm sure there's more tabs beyond what I'm going to show you guys today, but anything like that you can find directly through the search feature here. So the first one we'll start with is going to be the palette tab. So if we open this up, here you go. So there's a lot here. What all of this is within Java Swing, there's a lot of standard Swing just like components, I guess you could say, that you can put on top of this JFrame here. So you have Swing containers. These are containers that go on top of the JFrame, and then within these containers we can put things like controls. You have these menus that will go directly onto the JFrame itself and kind of work alongside containers. These menus won't actually store items like containers will per se, but they themselves don't necessarily have to be in a container like these controls would be. And then we don't have to worry so much about these. I think some of these are older options that wouldn't be used so much anymore. And these are just kind of formatting options that we don't have to get into too much here. So where you typically want to start is by dragging a JPanel. So we'll bring this over, and just to get a better view, we're going to make it pretty big to the size of the actual JFrame. And then within this JPanel, we can actually start putting some of these swing controls. So you can put one of these J labels. J labels are what you're going to use to store text information, so you want to show the user some kind of information. You can also set the JLabel to display an image instead of a string. So that's how typically we'll be doing our in-class project, is just by displaying a JLabel with an image of the map per se instead of a string. We can grab a button, bring it over here. So as you can see right now, I mean, we have these things on the frame, but it's not very easy to see kind of how everything's laid out. You can imagine if we had a J-frame on top of this J-frame on top of that one, and like a whole big structure going on this J-frame, you wouldn't know much kind of about the whole structure of the J-frame just from this interface here. So what we're going to add next is called the Navigator tab. If we get this here. So what this shows you is the whole hierarchy of your J-frame. So right now, obviously, I've just made this simple little demonstration here, but you can see that the J-frame contains the J-panel, and the J-panel contains these buttons. So you can imagine that, say I had a tabbed J-panel with different tabs that I could enter, then I would see all of these tabs listed under J-frame, and each tab itself would have attributes that were its children, that were included in its interface. So this gives us a better idea of how the J-frame is laid out. And then finally, one other thing that we'd like to be able to do is modify, say, the names of these J-label and J-buttons, maybe what the J-label displays, all that. So how we do that is with something called the Properties tab. So if we get Properties opened up here, you can see there's a whole list of attributes that we can modify for every type of these like Java Swing containers, controls, everything like that. So there's properties, these are your basic attributes, color, size, name, all that. There's events, so especially for, not so much for JLabels, but for things like JButtons, there's always going to be events that happen to the button, and then you can kind of trigger what code gets executed beyond that by working within this event section. And then there's the code section that will modify more hard-coded things that Netbeans will handle itself. So we will start off just by working within the properties and code section here. So it doesn't make much sense for this button to say JButton1. That's the default that it's initialized to, but that doesn't tell the user much about what this button's going to do. So here we can do something like make it say click me. If I do that, you can see the name changes to that. And while that changes the text that the user sees, this button is still stored under the variable name JButton1. So here we can change this as well. We can call it, say, click me button. And while we don't need to have button, it's just kind of convention to either have just the swing name of the type of label that you have, or even JButton would be more conventional. Usually buttons would be called JButtons, JLabels would be called something something JLabel, and etc. This would be something something JPanel. So what we can do now is change this variable name to, let's just say, demo JLabel. And so since we just changed the variable name, not the text, that's not going to be perceivable by the user. That's just something that'll help us know what we're working with as we create code. So for now, we're actually going to do what we can do with JLabels as well, is set their default text to be nothing. And while you're not going to be able to see it on the panel per se, under this Navigator tab, we can still see that the JLabel exists. So if we set that text to be something else, say through dynamic code, then that will appear and tell the user that some action has occurred. And that might be how you tell a user that they enter an invalid password if they're trying to log into your system, or anything like that, where you need to show the user a message that might not always be present on the J-frame. So finally, I'm going to show you guys how one might go about creating these dynamic code segments that will change the layout of a JFrame once the JFrame's already been initialized. So what we can do, either under this events code, you can determine which of these specific actions performed you want to modify, or for JButtons, a nice simple thing that Netbeans provides is if you double click on a button, it'll directly take you to that button's source code for what's going to be executed when this button action performed occurs. And all that means for JButtons is that someone has clicked on the button. So we will just do a very simple segment of code here. All that we need to do is, if we remember here, so demo JLabel is this JLabel, we set the text to be nothing. If we say demo JLabel dot set text, and we say you clicked a button, then if all works well, when we click this button, this JLabel that we've hidden should pop back up. So let's see. On file. Here's our beautiful little JFrame. If we click here, there we go. It's formatted a bit weird. Of course, we can spend more time getting that laid out properly, but here we go. We've created our first JFrame.